Hello, guys.
Well, good evening, everybody.
Welcome to Australia. The sun's coming out as we speak.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome. I'm Nathan Hill from One. It's great.
Yes, we got sunrise.
Absolutely wonderful to be joined by our friend Timo Mayer. We'll just give allow people to join. I think a few more people joining. It's 8:30 in the evening on a not too cold, but it's 6 degrees outside. The sun set at 4:30 this evening, so it's already dark and cozy. We're all curled up around our fireplaces, and we've just kicked Timo out of bed. It's 7:30 in the morning there in the Yarra Valley. And Timo, it's an absolute pleasure, wonderful to have one of my heroes of Pinot here available and able to talk through some wonderful wines. You should all have packs with the 6 wines. The Chardonnay, and please, if you haven't already done so, please open them up, pour them. If you've got 6 glasses, please let them breathe. Those wines are going to enjoy themselves being out of those stuffy little test tubes and just getting fragrant and ready for us to taste. So what's there to say about Timo? Well, I spent 4.5 months in New Zealand and Australia back in 2017. We started off spending 5 weeks in New Zealand, and then flew across into Sydney, drove all the way around the coast to the Melbourne area, spent a week in Tasmania, back to Melbourne, drove right round to Adelaide, and then flew up to the not Gold Coast actually, but sort of where was it, Cairns and Port Douglas area. But actually I enjoyed Melbourne and that area so much, I went back and spent another 5 weeks there. And on Saturday, the 18th of March, 2017, so my God, it's a long time ago.
Vintage time.
I knocked on this guy's kitchen door at about lunchtime on a Saturday afternoon. Timo's daughter was extremely stroppy because, and the dog wasn't happy either, because I think she wanted a lift somewhere, but you were busy entertaining me and showing me the winery and tasting the wines. And in fact, my picture this evening has got the famous or infamous Bloody Hill right behind me. I stayed in an Airbnb in Healesville, and in fact, Healesville is only about 45 minutes to the northeast of Melbourne, a nice drive out there and lots of stuff to see. And you just drive. I can't remember. I only think it's about 10 minutes out of Healesville, Timo, down.
Yeah, we only 10 kilometers. Yeah.
You go past. Well, it's quite near to Yarra Yering. It's opposite Mac Forbes Winery. You have to go past a farm, I think, called Wiggly Bottom Farm, if I remember rightly. and then you turn left onto an unmarked road, and I phoned him and said, "Where the hell am I? Have I gone to the right place?" And there I was on the bloody hill. I have just come yesterday for my first day.
So that's Healesville, just that little hill behind my vineyard.
There is the bloody hill.
That's almost the same view you got there. Look at that. How good's that? We're the same spot, the same time. That's magic. So yeah, across the road you got Mac Forbes, you got Yarra Yering up here on Mount Warramate, giant steps and all those. And then you got the southern end down here with the red volcanic soil. Yeah, the other part of the Yarra Valley. Kind of. Yeah, so we're bang in the middle between like Upper Yarra and Lower Yarra. The lower, yeah. Literally the road down here is the border between Upper Yarra and Lower Yarra, if people are familiar with that.
So it's actually slightly off the beaten track, but it is just off the main sort of drag where so many of the Yarra winemakers are. So
the main over that hill there. So that's exactly. We call it. So that's where the Melba Highway and the Maroondah Highway, that's all the main wineries are. We are off the beaten track here, going towards the southern end of the valley, going south. Which in Australia, southern end is the cooler end, kind of. We're going into the hills, right wide. So the vineyard, our vineyard is right on the on Mount Toolabillong, which is the Great Divide. So we got the altitude. We're like 200 meters up. We're a bit further up than the valley floor.
So that's wonderful. Straight away we can see it. So it's 7:30 in the morning. It's 20 degrees. It's 20 degrees in the Yarra Valley. The sun's been up for an hour and a half. I know where I'd rather be. Timo, first of all, can I encourage everybody, by the way, please don't stand on ceremony. You know, you can start to sip that Chardonnay, but we'll talk a little bit about your background, Timo, and then about the vineyard that you've just shown us. So, you know, I lived in Germany for 3 years, and you actually, you've just switched your, yep, there you are. You switched your video off, but you're back on again. You were actually born in Württemberg, just outside Stuttgart. Is that right? And your family has been farming there for 400 years or so. So tell us about your background and what made you move to the I think US and Australia. You're on mute now, Timo. Just for everybody who's waiting for Timo to unmute himself.
Here we go. Are we good again?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, all good again. Yes, I'm born and bred in Weinstadt. Weinstadt is in Remstal. It's literally just 20 minutes east of Stuttgart. Yeah, the family's been vignerons there, the Mayers in Großheppach, the same town, for the last 400 years, kind of. Me, I didn't want to work in vineyards when I was young. I thought there's a bigger world out there, so I left when I could. When I was 21, I went to the US, and I kind of never came back since. And I ended up in Australia. I met my partner Rhonda in America, and we settled in. So I left. When did I leave Germany? In '87, and we settled in Australia in '91, and we came to the Yarra Valley in '96. So that's almost 25 years ago. I've been here in the Yarra. I came here. I started working for the big guys. I was working with Steve Weber at the Borderlies the first 4 years. Then while I was there, we were looking for land, and yeah, we found this place here, which was just a cow paddock. There was nothing here. Like everything you see on this property. So we bought 40 acres, 16 hectares. Everything on this property, yeah, we put on it. Like in '98, we put the dam on. Then we did our cuttings. I was all selection Marcel for the vineyard. So we took cuttings from all over the Yarra Valley from vineyards I liked the wines of, kind of. We had a little nursery. Then in '99, we planted the vineyard. So that's 22 years old now. Then in 2000, we put the house up. 2002, the shed. And 2014, the new winery now. So in 2000, I went to Gembrook Hill, which is a little winery in the very southern vineyard in the Yarra Valley. So it's a bit later than where we are here. We are in the middle, kind of. So I could look after Gembrook Hill, which is only like a 5-hectare vineyard in a little winery. And I could make my wines there until, in 17, I stopped working for Ian and June up there. And we're just home now here. Now our son River joined us 3 years ago, River Ferguson Mayer. So he's helping us now. He's got his own label. He started off with Empire of Dirt, which he did with Ben from Indigo. And but Ben, he's found now another winemaker. And River's got the Bloody Hill label. So the Bloody Hill, which is the name of our vineyard, because, walking up and down of it, that's what we called it. The Bloody Hill, so River's got now the Bloody Hill Village label. And me and Rhonda, we got the Mayer label, kind of. And it's all made here in-house. We make it, bottle. Yeah, it's all, little family business. 3 people now. Used to be just Rhonda and I. Now it's River, Rhonda and I. And life's good.
And it's about 6 acres, isn't it, of planting you've got on the Bloody Hill?
We got 3 hectares now, a bit over. Bit over, 7 acres now.
Oh, it's gone up a bit. Okay, fine.
Which is mostly, we planted another half a hectare because I don't know if you heard about phylloxera came to the Yarra Valley like 15 years ago. It got brought in by some bigger companies, and when we started planting 22 years ago, everything was on their own roots. We just took cuttings, had a little nursery and planted them. So we didn't have money to buy rootstock. It wasn't an issue in those days because there was no phylloxera in the valley. when the Yarra Valley had phylloxera 100 years ago in the 1920s. And then it totally wiped out because there was a big industry, wine industry here in the early 1900s, because Europe had phylloxera and they used Australia to supply wine to England and things because there was no wine available, or not the volume in Europe anymore because of phylloxera. So yeah, the colonies got planted with vines here, probably here, South Africa, everywhere it was the same, to supply wine for Europe. But then in the Great Depression in the 20s, and then we got phylloxera, and Europe was replanted in the 20s. So the whole wine industry stopped in the Yarra Valley, literally went from big production to nothing. And then it was only in the late 60s, early 70s, when a few doctors, we call them the 5 doctors, started with small vineyards, like hobby vineyards. And yeah, so the industry in the Yarra Valley, the modern wine industry, is only 50 years old. And now 15 years ago, we got phylloxera again coming in because phylloxera is always up in the Rutherglen, never stopped growing grapes with port and stuff. And so that northern Victorian part always had phylloxera. They planted on rootstock early on, 100 years ago. So, and yeah, somebody brought it down and now we had it here. So everything has to be replanted, because slowly all the vineyards around us getting phylloxera, same here. So that's why we're planting new vineyards on rootstock and interplanting the old vineyards with rootstock.
Yeah,
that's a little project.
And we'll come back to that when we get to taste the close planted Pinot Noir a little bit later. Yeah. So everybody, let's get the first wine. So and then we'll have more questions. By the way, please do feel free to interrupt, raise your hand, or come off mute if you want to ask something. But Timo, we're actually going to start unusually, because you have very little of this, with your Chardonnay 2018. So tell us all about that tiny little bit of Chardonnay you plant and what you're looking to.
So the Chardonnay, we got 5 rows, which makes normally 2 or 3 barrels, say 60, 80 dozen of wine a year. The plantings for that wine we got from James Halliday's vineyard, the Coldstream Hills vineyard, the highest block on top, which, it's a clone, which I always liked the Coldstream Chardonnays in those days. So we got the cuttings from there. It's a clone called P58, Penfolds 58, which it has a lot of hen and chicken. It's like the Mendoza clone, it doesn't set very well. And so you got big berries and little berries, and so it's good acid and sugar. And it's not one of those modern tropical clones. It's more a neutral, citrusy clone. That's why we like it. I don't like those peachy, over the top Chardonnays. So I wanted something neutral. I just wanted to make it dry white, kind of. So I went for those cuttings 20 years ago, and yeah, we had to pull it out this year because of phylloxera, and we're replanting it with P58, but on rootstock now. So what you got there is the second last of the estate ones. Then we're going to have a 3-year gap and come back with estate Chardonnay. So the next 3 years, we're going to buy some grapes in to make our to sell the Mayer Chardonnay. So we're just going to mention them on the label. So yeah, so it's a pity. The wines are 20 years old. They're on their peak, best production, small crops, beautiful flavors. And now we have to rip them out. Anyway, philosophy. So with the Chardonnays, you got a new class. So 18, maybe I should start saying something about the 2018 vintage.
Please do.
2018 was... I can almost compare it with what happened in Europe in 2018, 6 months later. Like, we were ahead of them then. 2018 vintage was well above average crops. It was a beautiful fruit set, perfect weather. And then we had summer rains, like all the way till December. So December means almost to veraison. So the whole vegetative growing season, we had good rains, which in the Yarra Valley doesn't always. I mean, we are southern part of Australia, and we are the coolest part on mainland Australia. Now a lot of grapes go to Tassie. We'll talk about that later. Grape planting. So around Melbourne is the coolest part. That's where most of the Pinot Noir grows in Australia. And where was I going with this? The Chardonnay.
The 2018 vintage.
2018 vintage, that's where we at. So yeah, So same in Europe. Like I did vintage in 2018 in Europe. We make wine in Germany. We make a Riesling and some Spätburgunder, whole bunch. So 2018, we ran out of tanks in Germany. And we run out of tanks here, kind of. That's how big the crops were, because of that perfect fruits, that perfect vegetative growing season. And then we had this beautiful autumn. It was like from mid-January till April, almost no rain, just sunshine every day. So we did have bigger crops, but there was no disease pressure or no urgency to bring the grapes in, because there was, it was just a perfect autumn. So we could pick them, get them fully ripe, and top quality. We thought was one of the the years we had to fill the cellars up again. After 2014 was very, very low, and then 2020 was very, very low. So which we talk about later. So great vintage for us. Happy days. Cellar was full, and quality was good. We could make all our wines we normally make in 2018.
And the Chardonnay, tell us how you make it. What do you do in the winery with it?
So with the Chardonnay, as I said before, I want to have a dry white. I'm not a great fan of those worked in oaky Chardonnays. I'm sure that I know there's a place for it. And, a lot of people like it. But me personally, I'm more, if I look at the old world, I'm more of a stainless steel Chardonnay drinker, or no oak influence, kind of. And not worked, not least stirred, and all that. I don't want the fruitiness, I don't want the oakiness, I don't want the least stirring. I just want a dry white at the end of the day. So what we do, we just pick them on a cool morning. I mean, the whole winter Australia during picking season, because we don't have any chilling kind of in our little winery. It's just a little, 200 square meter shed. So we only pick till like 11 o'clock in the morning when the fruit's still cold from the night. And then we stop picking, kind of, and do winery work in the afternoons, and then start again next morning. The picking, so we pick it early in the morning when it's nice and cool. We whole bunch press it straight away. So we put the whole clusters into the press. So that way, because when we settle it, we get, after 2-3 hours, we hardly got any solids in the bottom of the tank. So we can use all the juice, because we don't have filters and all that stuff, and we don't use CO2 and all those things, no chilling. So we literally just let it settle while we press. One cleans the press, the other one puts it into barrels. All we do, we use old oak. They're all 300-liter barrels, hogsheads we call them. Although the last new Chardonnay barrel I bought was in 2008. So if you try a 2008 Mayer Chardonnay, there'd be a bit of new oak in it. Probably a third, but otherwise, we've gone away from that. I didn't like it, or I don't want it personally. So, just wild barrel ferment. So we don't inoculate any of our wines. Everything is wild fermented, wild Malo. So with the 2018, we did, just goes into barrel, and kind of, because we don't filter, none of our wines are filtered, even the whites. So we do have to let them go through Malo. But what we do, we have them like 6 months in oak, so over winter in oak, and then come springtime, like now in September, we take them out of oak and put them into stainless steel for another 4 months. So in those 4 months, it settles again naturally. And then when we bottle in January, normally before vintage. And so by the time I bottle them in January, I've got really cellar clear wines without filtration.
And you don't even have to rack it off?
No, we do one racking from the barrel into the stainless tank in September, and then we literally take it off the lees as we bottle. So there's one handling in the whole process.
Well, there you are. There's minimum intervention.
That's how lazy I am.
So I was going to say minimum intervention also means you get Saturday off. That's it.
Yeah, correct.
That's the right way of it. So
we try to keep it simple. We don't want to work the wines, just one handling. With the reds, we empty them like 2 days before, and then we do a little sulfur adjustment, and then straight into bottles. So whatever's in those bottles, whatever's in my barrels is in your bottles, except the last 5 liters, which is the least, kind of. We leave that behind.
Yeah, and I think, Timo, one of my very strong memories from us walking around the bloody hill together was you telling me it was 6 acres at the time. You've now given yourself another
we put
acre,
another
which is
acre on.
This is the size I can farm with just the three of us, basically.
Correct. Yeah, it's that simple.
So this is real family winemaking. When people ask me, so why don't you see this in the supermarket? You don't see it in the supermarket because Timo doesn't make enough to go in 2,000 branches of Tesco or whatever.
That's right. The whole idea is, if we can't do it ourselves, we won't do it. It's like, it's a small, River joined us now. That's why we planted another half a hectare for him. And he might plant another hectare or so in the future. There's enough room here on the hill for him to do his part, But Rhonda and I, we are happy with the 6 acres, kind of, we got here. Yeah.
That reminds me of my last visit to see my friend Clemens Bush in the Mosel, when there was a strip of the hill of the Marienberg in Punterich that didn't have anything on it. It just had wild raspberries and grass and little bits of vines that had escaped and stuff. And it was actually quite sizable. It was about quarter of an acre. So for that hill, it was quite big. I said to him, "What are you doing with it? Why aren't you planting it?" He said, "That's my son's project."
Yeah, we got the same here. Like literally, yeah.
Is the size you want. Team, any questions from anybody? Because this is our only white of the evening. So any questions about the Chardonnay before we move on to this amazing Gamay? Please feel free to unmute yourself or yell or stick your hand up or any one of those things. I might see you, I might not. I'll do my best. In that case, we'll go on to the Gamay. So this is the only wine this evening that I haven't had before, and I think this is Gamay 2018. I might say on your sheets 19, in which case that was a typo, but it is Gamay 2018.
It's 18, correct.
Now, look, Timo, I've seen a lot of things in my time, and I've been to Australian tastings in London where everything is Italian, Italian grapes, and then there's Tempranillo and there's Nebbiolo, and when I went to see Luke Lambert, obviously he's also very, very well known for his Nebbiolo. But what the hell? I mean, he makes an outstanding Neb. But what the hell are you doing with Gamay? Talk us through this Gamay 2018. That's wine 2, everybody.
Yeah, so I became a fan of Gamay because I couldn't afford Burgundy anymore. The prices were going through the roof, kind of. I think everybody's in the same boat. So, Gamay was always the poor cousin of Burgundy to me, and the way things went, it was the only affordable one. And I did like the old ones, 4-yard and all them, If the one issue with Gamay was the hygiene, not all of them were clean, but if you find the clean ones, they're beautiful wines. They're really good examples of great red, And what I liked about them, they're 100% whole bunch. And we started making 100% whole bunch wines in 2004. First Pinot we did was 100% whole bunch. So that was 16 years ago now, 17 years ago. And because I did like in the Burgundies, I did like always the Duchecks and stuff, and the whole bunchy ones. I did like in the Northern Rhone, the Kleps and the Alimors. It was always just 100% whole bunch, got something going for me, which that savoriness, that stalky, that herbal tannin thing, that which develops in the perfume. So as soon as I could get my hand onto a Gamay in the Yarra Valley, I jumped to it, and that was in 2017. So what you got there in front of you is my second vintage, my 7th try on a Gamay. The grapes come from a vineyard called Roundstone, which is in the northern end of the Yarra Valley, the northwestern end, behind the Bortleys, behind Dixon's Creek, warmer part. It is the first plantings of Gamay in the Yarra Valley. So those vines got planted the same as my vineyard in 89. So they were almost 20 years old when I made that. So they were mature. And I just, by that time in 2017, we were already doing Pinot Noir, Syrah, and Cabernet Sauvignon, 100% whole bunch. And we just wanted to add a few more wines into, in that portfolio. So Gamay it is. So what you see there my second try on a Gamay, 100% whole bunch, of course. So what we did with that, so how we do this whole bunch winemaking. So we have River and I sitting, when they pick the fruit, we sort the buckets right on when they get tipped into the bins. So we sort the fruit in the vineyard. First, we tell the picker to sort, and then we sort it again. So what goes into the picking bins is kind of clean fruit, because what we do, we ferment them in those half-ton fermenters. We literally bring them home, and that's it. So there's no more processing. There's no destemmers. There's no machines. We literally, from the vineyard, straight in our winery. Then what we do, we jump into one corner, kind of get a bit of juice going, and then we grab a bucket of Bloody Hill. So the Bloody Hill Pinot, which is the first Pinot we pick, we do an early pick, which is usually fermenting by then, naturally fermenting, mild fermenting. And we grab a bucket of that and cross-inoculate it to get our whole bunch ferments going straight away. Because we don't use any dry ice or CO2 out of bottle to make our wine. So we rely on the natural CO2 produced by the yeast. So because that's the only protection when you do 100% whole bunch, you need a protection. And yeah, CO2 is our friend in that thing. So we jump in, throw a bucket of Bloody Hill Pinot on it, and that will give us the CO2 production straight away. And then we kind of put the lid on and let it sit there for 10 days. So after 10 days, we find we get that carbonic going. So the carbonic is the intercellular breakdown, enzymatic breakdown of sugars, which gives us a little bit of alcohol, like 2%, yeah, and then they die, the enzymes. They can't work under alcoholic conditions. So then, but you do get that really vibrant, juicy flavors. And then after 10 days, once we get that, we take the lid off and we kind of jump in and we crush it by foot. Over the next 10 days, we treat it like a normal macerated red ferment to get color and skin tannins. So it's a 10-day, we call it semi-carbonic, semi-macerated over 3 weeks.
So Timo, just to get that right, it's whole berry carbonic. You don't
correct. Whole berry.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's got to be attached still to the stalks to get carbonic.
Okay.
Once you take the berry off the stalk, it won't be carbonic.
Yeah. Okay. So for everybody, we're really geeking it here. Okay. So carbonic maceration is we really are being very geeky here. So I have to taste. We should taste the wine as well. So please.
Okay. So what it gives you is that that juiciness, that vibrancy.
Carbonic maceration is, imagine instead of crushing the grapes and getting the juice, and then with the yeast it all ferments. This is starting off the fermentation berry by berry. Nicola, we're on wine 2, the Gamay. So we've had the Chardonnay, we're just on the Gamay now. So imagine carbonic maceration in this whole berry sense as every single grape being its own little fermenter. And that gets them going. And then basically when you do the pigillage, in other words, dive in with your feet and crush them all, then it all starts fermenting as a mass. And that accentuates that you get a really different texture and taste from this wine. And that very common, of course, in France, we have Beaujolais, which is, you're thinking of it as Burgundy, of course. Let's say the Burgundies that aren't Pinot Noir, but southern Burgundy or northern Rhone,
or northern Rhone. What is it? Which one is it?
which is the Beaujolais area. Now all of us Poms, of course, we tend to think of Beaujolais as that little loved area of Beaujolais Nouveau and sort of disgusting.
Yeah, that's bad.
Rushed to us in November. But actually, Beaujolais has gone through a huge renaissance over the last very few years. I'd say the last 6-8 years or so. And people like our friend Jane Eyre, that Osgundian, as they're called, from Gippsland, who makes wine in Mornington Peninsula, Gippsland, Yarra, and Tasmania. But also makes wine in Burgundy. She makes some fantastic Beaujolais, and the Beaujolais crew, the 10 or 11 villages, top villages of Beaujolais, are now making wine that's so good that even I will buy it, which is amazing because I never used to buy Beaujolais at all. So this is an absolute treat to taste this Gamay, and it's only your second go at it, Timo. So
yeah, so that's my take on it. Yeah.
So, and the whole bunchness of everything. we'll talk about this as we go on to the Pinots, I think. But you're definitely getting that what whole bunch.
It gives you that herbal edge. There's like you can taste the stalk. Yeah.
This one has got almost like a Chinese medicine herbal edge to it. It's got a really, what are those stalks doing there? Now, before we all get carried away with thinking about chewing the stalk of our table grapes, in a nice warm place like Australia, warm compared with where we are at the moment, of course, you're looking for a certain degree of maturity of the stems and deciding, and you're not throwing every stem in there, are you? Or you do?
It is.
All of them
it's the whole clusters, like
it's
literally.
All right.
It's the whole class. What we pick in the vineyard goes in that bin. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. God,
it doesn't see.
God, you're lazy. You're lazier than I thought. Well, there we.
Yeah. Well, I told you.
I love the minimum intervention. So what you've got there then, that stalkiness is adding that sort of acerbic nature. I think really sort of in this particular one, not so much in the Pinots, a really sort of Chinese medicine-like, strong herbal nature to it, which is really, really powerful, really gorgeous.
It also gives you different tannin structure as well, the stalks. You're not just relying on the skin tannins. You get the wood tannins from the green stalks as well, from the stalks. So it's a more savory feel. It kind of the stalk tannins cover your whole mouth. It dries up your mouth, whereas the skin tannins are more on your palate, more on your tongue. Does that people get that savoriness?
Yeah, really. I mean, it's almost it's really quite strong savoriness to it. It's absolutely fascinating. So I think a shout out for Gamay here. This is a New World one, but as I said, also closer to us here in the UK. Beaujolais is really, quite surprising that some top winemakers are really going back to it, and a huge renaissance there. In fact, we did an offer earlier this year of some of the Beaujolais from the Bichot stable, and they were absolutely outstanding and really went very well. Now we are going to move on to Pinot Noir and.
Back to the Gamay.
Sorry.
So once we did the 3 weeks, macerated, and we're happy with the colors and the tannin, we press it off, and then we literally just put it into. They are matured in 500 liters, so they're puncheons, 500-liter barrels, old puncheons, and then they spend till January. So from March till January in the punch for 10 months, and literally we just rack them out into a blending tank. Minimal sulfur addition, and bottle it, unfined, unfiltered.
Well, there you are. And how much of it did you make in 2018?
We had 1,000 liters. What's that? 110 dozen?
Yeah, there you are.
Yeah.
So 110 dozens, so 1,300 bottles odd. Okay, we need to move on, team. So we are coming to yet another highlight of the evening, and Timo wouldn't be Timo without Pinot. Timo, let's introduce the wine first so we can get tasting it. We're tasting the Doktor Pinot Noir 2019. So let's introduce the wine, and then I'll go on to ask you about the different Pinots you make. Okay. So everybody get your noses into this one, the Doktor Pinot Noir 2019.
So 2019. So now you're looking at a different vintage. So that's the wine from the 2019 vintage, very different beast to 18. So now we're below average crops in 2019. It was a vintage, or the wines of the vintage, so we had, less than normal. But the characteristics, if I want to summarize 2019 vintage, it is concentration, color, and tannin. Like if I put the 2019 vintage on a table between other wines, you can just see them by the color. They are a lot darker than unusually dark and concentrated because of the low crops, just the vintage it was. So with the Doktor, which is normally a lighter fragrant, the 2019 I find is quite concentrated, it's quite dark, darker than other years. So with the Doktor started off as a byproduct of the close planted. So we started 2014 was the first, we did a Beaujolais Nouveau, 100% whole bunch, which we didn't like because it's too carbonic. It was like those those Beaujolais Nouveau style. Then in 2015, we did the first close planted. We kept them separate and we did them 100% whole bunch. But we didn't thought it was too much, so we kept a bit aside, and that became the Doktor. So the Doktor is 100% whole bunch, whereas the close planted is a blend of whole bunch and destemmed. We get to that on the next one. So this is 100% whole bunch, so it's kind of made the same. So this is all estate fruit from the top of the hill, from the eastern part, and from a little bit from the southern end. Again, same winemaking as in all our wines, except the Bloody Hill and the close planted is the only wines which are, the Bloody Hill is destemmed, which is that white label, which we also did a granite, and now we're going to do a volcanic. It's the only wines we destem. The close planted is a blend of destemmed and whole bunch, and all the other wines we make are 100% whole bunch. So the winemaking is all the same in all of them. You try the Syrah later on, the Cabernet, Gamay, Doktor. So cool. Everything.
So we're going to do a little quiz for those of you who are into your Burgundy, and see if you can do my little quiz, which is to put in the chat box. If this is one for Burgundy aficionados, which part of Burgundy, if you thought this was a Burgundy, which village in Burgundy do you think this would come from? This 2019 Doktor. I think it's got. Yeah, exactly. It's a game I always like to play in the US, in Australia, and New Zealand. Not that it is a Burgundy, but just like what does it?
Yeah. Where would you put it in? Yeah,
stylistically and in terms of the fruit. So. Timo, we've got 2019 here, as you said, lower yield, darker, somewhat more somber in a sense, in terms of the taste. If I'm right, because we're going to go on to the close planted in just a moment. I think you do 4 Pinots, don't you? You've got the Bloody Hill Pinot, the one with the white label, and that's destemmed and the younger vines lower down.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And then we've got the Doktor and the close plant. You've got the Doktor and the close planted, and then you just have one labeled Pinot Noir, don't you? Is that right?
No, I got the granite. The granite, which is from the north. Yeah, on a granite.
So,
but now we've changed. Yeah, we're going to do a volcanic.
The differences. Yeah. Can you just talk through the differences of those?
So the Bloody Hill, I mean, the whole vineyard's called the Bloody Hill. So we started off the first 4 vintages just making a Bloody Hill, putting kind of all together. Then by the 4th, 5th vintage, we got like a quarter of the vineyard 100% closer planted, 6,000 wines to the hectare instead of 3,000 wines to the hectare. Plus they're different clones. The clones from the close planted I got from the Bortleys. I don't know if people are into clones, MV4 and MV5, which aren't really commercial clones around Australia, whereas the Bloody Hill is MV6, which is a more commercial clone, goes very well in Australia. MV stands for mother wine. Mother wine, 3, 4, 5, 6. They did up in Riverland in the 40s. They did all these. They took all these cuttings from around Australia and from France, and they look what suits Australian climate. Because what is good in Burgundy for grape wine is not good here, because we are dry. We have drier summers. So what we selected for Australia is later ripening varieties and varieties that can handle drier conditions. Because like in European summers, you get a rainfall every week or 10 days, every 2 weeks, light rainfall, so you don't have to irrigate. You can't, everything is vegetative the whole growing season. Whereas here in Australia, we can have summers where it doesn't rain for 6 weeks, kind of. So the clones we have selected here are for our conditions. And MV6 is one of the great workhorses in Australia, So most of the plantings in Australia are MV6, which is the Bloody Hill. Plus a few other clones, 114, which is a Burgundy clone, which ripens a bit too early for us over here. MV4 and MV5 are very low cropping clones, which they didn't get selected commercially. But they're very small bunches, very intense, more in color. And so that's what we use for the close planted and the Doktor. So the close planted started in 2015. So that's 2005, sorry. 2005, that's when we started doing our second whole bunch ferment. We didn't like our first whole bunch ferment in 2004. because we did the carbonic way. We just put 3 beans into a stainless steel tank and put the lid on, which is how you make Beaujolais Nouveau, you know, and then come back 3 weeks later and press it off. And it was a very light in color because you're not extracting any skin color, skin tannins. It's very, what is it called? It's got that jubiness. There is lolly flavors, esters, bananas.
Yeah, they're like pastels.
Yes, correct.
They're like
yes.
sweets,
And
pastels, yeah.
correct. So that's what we didn't like in 2004. So in fact, we've got to change this, you know. I want color, I want tannin, I don't want all those esters. So that's in 2005, we changed to this semi-carbonic, semi-macerated. Treat it 10 days as a carbonic and then 10 days as a proper red wine. That way, all the esters lift off in the ferment. Plus, we got better color and better tannin. So that's, but with the close blinded, I didn't want it all about stalks because stalks is a bit polarizing. Not everybody likes 100% whole bunch wines. You can say probably only half the population is a fan of whole bunch wines because there is that bitterness that from the stalky tannin, that herbal edge, which is a bit like in Campari. You can say like only half the population likes Campari, the other half doesn't because of that bitterness. So with the close blind, we thought, you know, I do like, if you de-stem everything like in the Bloody Hill, you get a really nice fruity wine. They're fruity, but they probably haven't got the depth. You know, they're lacking that savoriness, you know, which everybody likes de-stemmed wines. That's why 99.999% of the world's red wines are de-stemmed, literally, because it's easy winemaking and it's, palatable. People love it. But to build complexity into a wine, it's a good way to add complexity is by doing a percentage in whole bunch, because it does give you a different flavor and it does give you a different tannin structure. So that's what we started with the close blind, which is the next one.
That's excellent. So we're just moving on now, but we're moving back to 2018, that more generous vintage and the close planted. And the close planted again is all about phylloxera and the way you've planted those rows, isn't it? Because you've planted vines in between. Yeah,
but that was early on before phylloxera. So that was early on. I did, they're literally 75 centimeters apart. So you only get like 8 bunches per vine, whereas on the Bloody Hill, they 1.5 meter apart. You get like 20 bunches per vine. So the close plant, plus it's different clones. So the close plant is normally more concentrated. And so to just being concentrated, I mean, now 18 vintage is lighter than 19 vintage. You've got the 2 different vintages there. 18 is a bit prettier, more high lift than 19. But yeah, by having those concentrated fruit, you know, to get a bit of lift into it, we went for the whole bunch, kind of. But I don't want a whole bunch to be a feature in this wine. I just want to add complexity. So there's probably only 20 to 30% whole bunch. So 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 barrels is a whole bunch barrel in that blend. Whereas in very hot years, like in 13, and what was another hot one, 15, we go like up to 50% whole bunch in the close planted, because we do want that savoriness. You know, we do want to cut that sweet fruit on the top. And the higher the alcohol, the better, the warmer the season, the more whole is suited to whole bunch. Mm-hmm. In a cool year, you don't want to go hard on whole bunch, because a cool year, and you'll see, you know, it almost, if the grapes aren't really ripe, you already got a green tannin in the skins, plus the green tannin from the stalks. It can get ugly. You can have like over green wines, whereas in a hot year, warm year, you can throw as many whole bunches as you want in there because it really suits it. It kind of brings it back, makes it more lifted, aromatic.
Mm-hmm. So we'll carry on our little game of which village in Burgundy does the close planted remind you of. Let's look at what people have put for the. Let's look at what people have put for the first one we had, the Doktor Pinot Noir 2019. We got Charlie saying Gevrey Chambertin, and Red and Sophie said Morin Saint-Denis. I think both are quite good punts. I'd go slightly more for Morin Saint-Denis or somewhere sort of northern Marais Saint-Denis, sort of Bon Mar or something like that. So that's a really good one. You've got that.
Yeah.
You've got that richness, that suppleness, that density of fruit.
It is dense, the 19. I mean, that's the vintage comes out, yeah.
And yeah, you know, I've literally just came yesterday from the. I'll talk at the end about some of the things that the Honest Goats Wine Club is doing at the moment. But I just came yesterday from the Hospice de Beaune pre-tasting, not of the 2021. That'll be in a couple of weeks' time in Burgundy, but of some back vintages. And I have to say that, you know, your wines, Timo, are everything as good as a solid Premier Cru Burgundy in terms of the complexity, the concentration, what this gives. So actually, I think to say, you know, in my little game, to say Marais Saint-Denis or Gervais Chambertin, that's good. So let's give what people think. What village in Burgundy do you think the close planted Pinot Noir comes from? If it weren't from the bloody hill in the Yarra Valley, let's dig into this one and taste it. As you say, more lifted perfumes in this one.
Yeah. So it's again 18 vintage, two very different vintages. Yeah. Yeah. In style wise.
And the close planted would normally be, if it was the same vintage, would the close planted normally be more intense than the Doktor, or the other way around?
The 19 one, yeah, it's a lot richer, darker, yes.
The close planted.
Normally the Doktor is the lighter wine out of the two. But because you got the two vintages, yeah, two very different vintages, I think, yeah, the 18 looks lighter than the 19. Whereas normally the Doktor should be the lighter wines because it's more whole bunch.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if we get really geeky, and I know you're not doing temperature control and stuff, you actually have a different optimum fermentation temperature and different alcohol level that you get out of whole bunch. So
yeah, correct. Yeah.
So it's actually very technically, you know, it's very different.
It's a cooler ferment, the whole bunch. Yeah, that's why it's normally more lifted. Yes, correct.
Yeah, because if you got the ferment too hot, you'd be having stewed stalks, which may not.
Yeah, that you extract those really bad stalk tannins, which gave whole bunch a bad name. I think a lot of people, you know, go on the back foot. Oh, whole bunch, you know, shit, I don't like it, you know, because they were. Yeah, if they get too hot, you extract the bad tannin out of the green stalks, which if you do a whole bunch proper and you only crush a few berries every day, the ferment can't get hot because there's not enough sugar. It's not enough sugar for the yeast to create heat. So it ferments like at room temperature. Whereas the Bloody Hill, which is all destemmed, you got like 1.5 tons of mass. And there's like, 20% of sugar in there. You know, there's like, 300 kilos of sugar in a 1.5 ton fermenter. So the yeast goes crazy and the thing goes to 35 degrees, 36 degrees. We haven't got any chilling. So it literally kills itself. The yeast slows itself down. It dies because it gets too hot.
Yeah. I was just about to ask you that question. Without temperature control, how do you stop it running away?
You can't. We use 1.5 ton open fermenters.
Yeah.
And yeah, you just got to, like what we do with the destem part, we just destem it, put it in an open fermenter, and then we let it sit there until nature does its thing. And normally after 5 or 6 days, the surface of the open fermenter goes a little bit moldy and stinky, a little bit of nail polish remover. That's when the yeast starts to ferment up on the surface. And as soon as you get a bit of ethanol, the acidic bacteria makes the nail polish, you know, the ethyl acetate. So as soon as you start that, you start pumping over to reduce, so you can't have, because you don't want too much ethyl acetate. I do like VA. VA is a nice little complexing agent in the winemaking technique. It's one of the techniques which does give you a lift. So VA is good to a certain level, you know, but you don't want too much. So you pump over, that stops the VA kind of. And then once you pump over, the yeast, it starts fermenting. So it's from day 5 to day 10. So those 5 days, the ferment kind of almost goes dry. It goes so hot in a 1.5 ton till it slows itself down. And all we can do is plunge it, or there's nothing we haven't got chilling, so there's nothing we can do.
Cool. We're going to move on in a minute, but can I have some more entries for the Which Village in Burgundy competition? Sophie has said Marcenay. That's a good spot. Charlie is saying a warm Nuit Saint-Georges.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other guesses? Can I have some, James, Luke? See, Vern Romanée. Gosh, well, well, there you are.
It's real pretty.
Yes, it's that bloody Romanée Conti, bloody Hill Romanée Conti. Wonderful. Yeah, actually, Sophie, I think that Marcenais spot is a good one, or Saint-Romain, or something like that. Okay. I think actually with the it's a vintage thing as well. I think with this vintage, it's showing some more of that side valley characteristic. But I hope you don't mind me playing this game, Timo, but I just love it. Just where are you in Burgundy? Where would this have come from? Now, also, we didn't talk about this earlier, but that a very good friend of mine, Rainer Schneidmann, makes wine in Württemberg, in Fellbach by Stuttgart. Yeah. Very, very close to where you come from. And tell us briefly, before we're just going to start to move on to the Syrah now, but just before we do that, tell us about the wines you're making in Germany still, the Riesling and the Spätburgunder Pinot Noir.
Yeah, so we started 2008. We started that little project. I went home, except the last 2 years, 19 and 20. No, 19 we made a wine, yeah. So 20 and 21, there won't be any German wines. But since 2008, I always went over there and made a few barrels of Riesling, literally just wild barrel firm, just with a friend of mine. I do pick a Riesling, just stomp it for a day, leave it on skins for a day, press it the next day and put it straight into old oak, 3 old hogsheads. We only made 100 dozen every year, kind of. And then a wild barrel ferment left on lees all year, kind of full Malo, whatever happens. And that was it was made like a Chardonnay, but it used the Riesling for it, So it's a more of a voluptuous, textural Riesling. And then in 2000, so we've been doing that for the last 10 years, 11 years, and which we only sell here in Australia. We don't export that. And then in 2000, with the warmer years over there, 2015, 2018 was a really warm year in Europe. We started doing some reds. So we're doing a Pinot Noir, 100% whole bunch Pinot. And we also tried a Trollinger. In 2018, we did a 100% whole bunch Trollinger, which, nobody's done before over there. Yeah, that's just something new.
Yeah, Trollinger, very much a grape of the Württemberg, the Schwäbisch.
Yeah. Württemberg takes that one. I think it's the biggest growing area in the world now. It's overtaken Alto Adige, Südtirol. Yeah.
So my mate Rainer Schneidmann makes a Grosses Gewächs Lemberger. So,
Lemberger.
I'm conscious of time. Let's taste the Syrah 2018, our 5th wine. So now this is another small bit of your vineyard, isn't it?
So the Syrah is in the north. It faces the afternoon sun. It's a west-southwesterly facing slope. So in the easterly slope, we put the Pinot Noir in the morning sun, and in the afternoon sun, we planted some Syrah. So with the Syrah again, the Kleps and the Alamos are always the ones I look up to, the ones I always enjoy. So again, we had to do 100% whole bunch. We don't use any new oak. So the only 2 wines we use new oak in this lineup, or in general, I use new oak a little bit in the Cab Sav and a little bit in the close planted, 20-25%. 1 in 4, 1 in 5 barrels is new in those 2 wines. Whereas the Syrah gets no new oak. It's all old hogsheads, 300s. Yeah. So again, made the same way, fruit sorted in the vineyard. Yeah. Put in the winery for 3 weeks, pressed, put into old oak. Very simple. Again, now the viticulture changed a bit over the last 20 years with the Shiraz. 20 years ago, our picking dates were in mid-March. It started mid-March, the vintage. Now the vintage starts in end of February. So we come 3 weeks forwards, kind of, except in the 20 vintage, which was 20 and 21 was 2 cold vintages. We were picking in mid-March again. But in generally, the way the weather's going, so with the Syrahs, in the early days, we had to expose them to the sun to get them ripe. Now, the last 5-8 years, we don't trim the Shiraz anymore. We let the canes hanging over, so the fruit hangs in the shade, because we do like those peppery flavors, those cool, like Victorian Shiraz. It's not South Australian, it's not Western Australian. It should be should be peppery, spicy. And so to achieve that, yeah, we kind of had to change the viticulture and keep the wines bushier, because I do want that pepper. You know, that's one of the great, you know, love it or hate it, but that to me is Victoria. There's some great examples, you know, Craig Lee and all those. I don't know if you tried them. Yeah.
Well, and Luke Lambert as well with his
Luke Lambert's, yeah. Yeah,
and
that's Yarra Valley, yeah.
And so I think, you know, I think the people in your part of Australia, and I'm, by the way, I'm not going to ask people which village in the Northern Rhone this approximates, but I think the people in the Yarra who get Syrah right are the people who are making a Syrah, not a Shiraz, and treating it more like they treat the Pinot. They're making a ballerina, not an elephant, of a Shiraz.
Correct. Yeah, we try to keep him pretty. You know, I mean, there's no right or wrong with what the other states do in Australia, but they are warmer climates, the other places, and their wines are bigger. You know, they use more new oak. You know, whereas we kind of more let the fruit do the talking, the prettiness. So we do pick them on. As soon as we get the spicy flavor, we pick them. You know, I don't want the dark, you know, blueberry, you know, blackberry flavors, you know. So it's earlier, keep it kind of pretty. Yeah, don't use new oak to kill the pretty flavors. And yeah, and call it Syrah. So people do know the difference. You know, people buy Shiraz and then they see our Syrah, it is a different style, you know, so they can't get confused.
And again, did you say all whole bunch?
Yeah, 100% whole bunch.
All whole bunch on this, and one fifth, yeah, brilliant.
No new oak. No, it's 100% whole bunch, no new oak.
No new oak at all, brilliant, okay. Yeah,
the new oak is only in the Cab Sav and in the close planted. There's 1 in 5. Yeah.
So why I'm so pleased we're having a cool climate Yarra Syrah this evening is this, you know, for us Brits who are used to tasting, you know, Barossa Shiraz, and you know, that's what we associate Aussie Shiraz. This is nothing like that at all. This is a ballerina, not an elephant of a wine. It's beautiful, it's fragrant, it's lifted, it's got that whole bunch characteristic. Again, that slightly herbal Chinese medicine Jaeger thing going on in the background there, but only very little this time. Really what's coming through is the floral nature, the pretty nature, the elegance of it and the length. Really, really, really delicious, delightful wine. We'll move on now to our final wine, which is wine 6, which is the Cabernet, and we're back to 2019 again. So do you want to talk us through that? And again, we're back into the whole bunch versus destem debate.
Yeah, that's kind of a rare wine, the whole bunch, 100% whole bunch Cab Sav. So that started in 2014. We had very low crops. Was like 2002, was like, what was the other low one? 2020 was very low. And 2014 was bad fruit set. So I literally, instead of having 30 barrels of Pinot Noir in my cellar, I only had 6 barrels of Pinot Noir in my cellar. So that's how low the crops were. And we thought, Jesus, you know, all the barrels are empty. So we thought, what can we do? Let's grab it's Cabernet Sauvignon was a later flowering. So the valley was full of Cab Sav, but there were no early varieties. There was no Chardonnay, no Pinot, no Syrah. You know, so we said, let's buy a few bins of Cab Sav and see what we can do, you know, to fill a few barrels. And we thought, well, we're not going to do the old destemmed Cab Sav because I did that once before. So 2014 was the second Cab Sav I ever made. In 2006 was my first one. In 2006, I did the textbook Cab Sav winemaking. You know, I crushed it, destemmed it, put in own fermenters, you know, worked it for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you know, pressed it, and you couldn't drink the fucking thing. You know, it was so tannic, you know, because Cabernet Sauvignon got really, really big tannins, like awful tannins, kind of when they're young. They're clunky tannins, not like Nebbiolo, which got silky tannins. Pinot Noir got silky tannins. Whereas Cabernet is chunky. It's a bad tannin in the tannin world. But with polymerization, with time, those tannins polymerize and they become nice tannins. So you got to wait 10 years before you can drink a Cabernet Sauvignon, yeah, which happened to me in 2006. So 2006, I made this normal Cabernet, literally bottled it. I couldn't drink it. I said, Jesus, I can't put a label on this. So I had it in the cellar for 2 years. You know, after the 3rd year, I put it down in the vineyard shed. You know, no cooling, no insulation. So there was this bottled Cabernet Sauvignon. I had like 2 bins of it, 100 dozen. down in the vineyard shed, 40 degrees in summer, 0 degrees in winter. And I just used it to make goulash. Every time I wanted a goulash, I went down there, grabbed the bottle, had a sip, and put it in. By year 8, was it then 2012 or something, 2014, I took a sip, and now you can drink it. That's how long it took before you could drink it. I said, well, I won't be doing that again. So in 2014, when I made my next Cabernet, I said, check, let's do 100% whole bunch, because that way I can regulate how much tannin I get in my Cabernet, because we don't do any fining. I said that earlier. There's no fining or filtration. So normally Cabernet, if you want to drink it young and you destem, you crush your berries during the ferment, people use egg whites. They fine the tannins out so they can drink them young, or you mature them for 10 years, one or the other. So what we did 100% whole bunch, same as our Syrah and Pinot in those days. And with the Cabernet, so what we do, the first 10 days, all our ferments are carbonic. The next 10 days is I crush berries. And it's how many berries I crush is how many skin tannins I extract out of the ferment. So with the whole bunch Cabernet, we probably only crush 1/3 of the berries. And by that time, I got enough tannin, enough color. I am, as a Pinot drinker and Syrah drinker, I'm happy with the tannins. Yeah. Whereas the other way, you extract 100% of the tannins, you got to fine it or you got to wait, one or the other. So that is the most carbonic wine we make would be that, the Cabernet Sauvignon. Like with the Syrah, we probably crush half the berries. With the Pinot, Nebbiolo, Gamay, we crush 80-90% of the berries because we do like their tannins. And, they're fine. But Cabernet tannin, when it comes to tannin, I think it's one of the most awkward tannins. And and so we don't extract them all. We leave 2/3 of the tannins behind.
Wow, that is some Cabernet and pretty unusual. Timo, we're going to round off the formal part of the evening in a minute, and then let people get to their dinner or their Horlicks or cocoa as it's the evening. But I've just put in the chat that we have very little of the wines we've had this evening. There's very little available left in the UK, and so we're going to send out an email offering a mixed case of 3 of the evening's wines, the close two each of the close planted Pinot Noir, the Gamay, and the Cabernet. There's only 6 of those cases available, and Charlie and the team will send an email out to people tomorrow. We've got 6 of those available for £160 a case. That's with duty and VAT. But with the generosity of Timo sending new wine over to us, we have a range which I've put in the chat of the 2020s and Syrah 19 on their way over to the UK at the moment. Could you tell people a little bit about the 2020 vintage, because we haven't tasted it this evening? What should we expect?
Yeah, so 2020 just should have landed over there. So as I mentioned earlier a little bit, so 2020 was a very low crop again. We're down there, 60% kind of. Very cool year, very cool and late year. Small crop, very intense, very aromatic. So we started picking like we picked 10, 15 years ago in mid-March. So very, very lifted, pretty aromatic. So a typical Yarra year, how it used to be. I mean, with this Cabernet, you can see it's quite intense in its Cab Sav flavors, but it just hasn't got the tannins like in a macerated Cabernet. So it's a Cab Sav for Pinot drinkers. That's what we call it. That's why the restaurants, like the Somme, love. I mean, that was one of the first 100% whole bunch Cab Savs in Australia. Like, I don't know anyone who did one before, So it is a style. They told me at the time when I did it in 14, you can't do whole bunch Cab Sav because of the tannins, but it's actually, I can manage my tannins better going down that way, than the other way.
So in terms of the nose and the taste of the 2020s, what should we expect compared with the 18s and 19s we've tasted this evening?
So the 19s is the most concentrated, dark and deep. So it's not like that. 18, it's a high crop, but very elegant. Whereas so the 19, it's elegant, but more concentrated, but not like 19. Yeah.
And 2020?
That's what I'm saying. 2020 high lift,
Right.
lift. Yeah, concentrated. It's between the 18 and the 19, something in between.
Cool. Okay. So that's
Yeah.
going to be a fascinating vintage to have. So
Yeah.
Annoyingly, you'll see when you get email from us, these wines, normally we try and offer things in sixes, but these are packaged in dozens. We'll send the email out offering them in dozens. If anybody wants to split a case, we'll do our best to. But if you're buying them in bond, the transfers will be in dozens. I'll round off the formal bit here. So if people are having a late dinner or looking for their cocoa or something, Timo, I want to talk about climate change now, but I want to give permission for people to disappear because we've just gone over the hour. So if those of you who are leaving us, thank you for joining us. And people, please feel free to come off mute and ask questions. Given that Timo, given that we've got the big COP conference, COP26, in the UK at the moment, and not making any political points about Australia's government and its view of climate change, but changes to the climate are severely affecting production, particularly of grapes like Pinot Noir around the world. And the 2021 production of Pinot and Chardonnay in Burgundy is massively affected. So 80% loss of Chardonnay through the frosts in early April. Pinot Noir down by between 40 and 50% from most of the winemakers I've spoken with. Tell us something about climate change and the Yarra Valley and how it's affecting your winemaking and that of your mates around you.
Yeah, so the biggest change here is that it is getting warmer, obviously. The picking days, as I said before, come forward 3 weeks easily. You know, the Yarra Valley, when the Doktor started in the 70s, they picked end of March. So it's a whole month from then. So when I came here 25 years ago, we picked mid-March. Now we're picking end of February. So what we have to do, we have to change the viticulture to adjust to that climate change, you know. We're planting different varieties at different places now. Like the southern end of the Yarra, which is the cooler Yarra part, which used to be all sparkling wine in the olden days. Like Hardy's, Dimension Don, they all took their sparkling from the upper Yarra, we call it. You know, it was all Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. You couldn't ripen Shiraz or anything else. Now you can ripen Shiraz there. Now the sparkling wine production has gone down to Tasmania. So all the new plantings of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay go to Tassie, even further south. And the upper Yarra, which used to be sparkling wine, is now great table wine. So we're moving more and more south. We're also moving high in altitude. Now, the highest vineyard is just the one I'm looking up out my window here, which is at 700 meters now. I'm at 200 meters. So people moving up the hills, going uphill every 100 meters gives you like 3-4 days later ripening, you know. So we use altitude, we use latitude, we use different viticulture practices. Now, in the olden 25 years ago, you leaf pluck, you shoot and you opened up the canopy to get sunlight in and keep disease out. Now you let the canes hanging over the vines to get shade into the canopy, because you don't want too much sunshine, because sunshine takes away too much sunshine on the grapes gives you great color, but it takes away prettiness, it takes away lightness, aromatics. So to keep those aromatics, we kind of keep them in the shade a bit. We just sparsely leaf pluck, you know, to get good airflow, but still 80%, 70% in shade.
So it's going to be pergolas next.
Yeah, like Italy. Yeah. You wait. Italy figured it out a long time ago.
I realised before people disappear, I had a few little sort of Honest Grapes Club things to remind people of. Our Christmas market is the 25th of November in Chinatown, a real life event. Tickets are only £25. Bring friends along. Do join us for a real life tasting event. The Auspice Syndicate is getting pretty full now. The Auspice de Beaune, where we'll be buying French Pinot Noir. That the auction itself is on the 21st of November, please get your commitments in very soon now, because that's getting quite full. And those of you, I hope, sort of wanting to top up on your stocks of wine in time for Christmas, please make Sophia and Ash's life pleasant by ordering your wine, preferably by the end of November or the first week of December. We get so incredibly busy in the very short run up to Christmas. It's really helpful if club members buy from us early. None of you ever listen to me, but please do. You'll make everybody's lives easier. Timo, tell me about Tasmania. So I've got a little story. So this is one I don't think I told you. When I was with you, you very kindly gave me a bottle of your German Riesling, and I took that and a bottle of the Doktor Pinot Noir. And we consumed them on the Spirit of Tasmania.
On the way over.
which is quite funny. When you go to Melbourne, people have heard of Tasmania but never been there. It's almost like the equivalent of the Isle of Wight in the UK. It's somebody, yeah. I don't know if anybody's been to the Isle of Wight. It's just a little island off the south coast of the UK, off Southampton. But everybody seems to have heard of Tasmania, but nobody's been there. And when I took my hire car on the Spirit of Tasmania, people looked at me as though I was absolutely bonkers. And I had this very surreal experience of being overnight in a very, very unpleasant little cabin. And so going out and consuming my Riesling and my Doktor Pinot Noir with a bunch of Tassies, which is quite fun, and then tasting lots of Tasmanian wine. So what do you think of Tasmanian Pinot and Tasmanian sparkling wine?
I mean, going south in the southern hemisphere means getting to the colder area. Yeah, we're getting close to the South Pole. So it is a lot cooler over there. The industry in the olden days, like early on 20 years ago when I came to Australia, the whites were very, very light. You know, it was cool climate. Mm-hmm. You know, they were light in color, light in tannin, you know, yada, yada, yada. Now with climate change, you know, Tasmania is going crazy. Like, everybody's moving down there to get away from the heat. You know, it is a nice look. There's so many different terroirs. There's different rainfall patterns. You know, the east coast is really dry. The west coast is really wet. They got up in the north. They got some of those red soils, the young volcanic soils, which are really aromatic, pretty wines coming out of there. Along the Tamar, you know, so
Tamar River, really interesting. And there's I think the world's only Seahorse Museum up that part of the Tamar as well.
I must have skipped that.
Alfred loves seahorse. Alfred loves seahorses. Spent half a day there. And there's also lots of sort of Alsatian varieties, Pinot Gris, and things like that around there as well.
They're planting Gamay now. Gamay's going down there.
So, you know, so Nicola, you're saying you've been to Tasmania. Can you tell us what you thought of it if you come off mute?
I was there quite a while ago now, before I was very into wine. So we did lots of hiking. It was a beautiful place.
Yeah, it's nice up on Cradle Mountain on there. Yeah,
we did that hike. It was great. But yeah, I was went around, like we drove from Adelaide back to Victoria and visited a few wineries back then. But pre Wine Geek days. So
okay. Yeah, I mean it's just tasty, you know, the variety. So they get now Syrah right down there. Beautiful Syrahs are coming from there now, you know. Whereas here in the Yarra Valley, which used to be cool climate, it's still cool, you know. All this area around Melbourne, Macedon, Mornington, you know, Yarra, you got Gippsland, you know, and Geelong. They are the 5 areas which used to be all Pinot Noir. Now we're planting in Dixon's Creek, the warmer part of the Yarra Valley. They're planting Grenache, you know. So we are going now Grenache, Sangiovese, you know. There's later varieties. So we're planting later varieties, the same as they do down there, you know. But they are now really it's the future. The way the climate goes, we got to go either south or up, you know.
And have you heard of winemakers called From Sundays in Australia? They're based in Orange. They carbonic macerate everything. Pinot Gris.
Yeah, I haven't heard from them. But Orange is a nice area. That's high up, high altitude. Okay. They're like at 700 meters or 800 meters. There's some great wines coming out of there. An old volcano.
Yeah.
No, I'm not familiar with that label, but yeah, there's some great wines coming. Canobola Smith, he was one of the first ones up on the volcano at 700 meters or something.
Okay.
Beautiful Pinots, like 25 years ago. Yeah.
And there's also a lot going on in northern Victoria now as well, with with Macedon, King Valley, all sorts of stuff going on now. Heathcote, really the spread of winemaking across Victoria is much broader than I think it used to be.
Yeah, I mean, King Valley is always, because there's lots of water up there coming out of the mountains. It's a big site, big growing site. Macedon, very small, very little, it's been around forever. It's like the Yarra Valley, but higher altitude. Like they are up at 600 meters. So there used to be a sparkling wine area, Macedon. Now it turned into table wine. So yeah, really nice wines coming from there. Heathcote is a more flat. It's a more late variety. It's very warm. Heathcote is warm and dry. Very easy viticulture because it hardly rains up there. So it's north of Melbourne a bit. Very little rainfall. Very good, to grow organic grapes up there because you hardly have to spray. But late varieties, Grenache, Shiraz area, like kind of. And southern Italian varieties they plant. Charmers planting a lot of varieties from the south of France up there.
Mm-hmm.
So south of Italy. Sorry, south of Italy.
So many new varieties going in. Timo, I'm going to round off with a quote, which I know you'll remember from Winefront Australia, which is, "What's left to say about Timo Mayer? Aside, he keeps on making outstanding, fascinating, wonderful wines. There's the howling at the moon, baying at the wind, shirt tearing and pant splitting stuff, of course, in his incredible side." Well, we haven't had much howling at the moon, baying at the wind, shirt tearing. There's been a little bit of pant splitting, I think. But Timo, I'd like to say thank you from me. It's been really lovely to spend another hour with you in your company, drinking your wines. Absolutely incredible. Thank you from the team at Honest Grapes and from our club members. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much. If anybody wants to quickly hang on and say goodbye, otherwise we'll be closing off the evening. Timo, thank you so much.
Well, great catching up, and hopefully, I'll be over there again next year. They let us out of here, so.
Thank you for hosting. I think probably the earliest wine tasting I've been participating for you.
Well, you can get to work now. It's Thursday morning in Hillsdale.
Well, great catching up with you, and we'll see you next year over there, hopefully.
Thanks, Timo.
Thank
Cheers. Thank you very much indeed, Timo.
Cheers, Timo.
Hannah, you will do the work. Right. Hannah's the face of Mayo in Australia, in the UK, in case you haven't known.
Me?
Talk to Hannah. She looks after you. Okay, you guys have a good one.
Thanks so much, Timo.
Timo, thank you.
Good to see you.